Traveling is a fun activity that can be done in groups or just with your own company. At least once a year, it's good to travel and see how much of the world has to offer, since it not only relaxes you, it helps you have a broader mind. But with the current situation of the world today, we can only hope for the day, maybe a year or two from now, where we can travel again freely across the borders of the world without the fear of getting sick. Everybody needs to live their life on their own terms, so it's best to experience other cultures and customs to have a better understanding of what's around us. And speaking of cultures and customs, did you know that certain gestures are frowned upon in some countries? If you're not aware of this, then you're in luck. Welcome back to our channel once again, where today we'll be discussing some of the things you shouldn't do while you're in a different country. So if you ever find yourself about to do some of these actions listed, try avoid doing these gestures when you travel overseas. But before we get into it, be sure to click the like button and subscribe to our channel with the notification bell on to be updated on our newest releases. We're pretty sure that people who've traveled to another land at one point struggle with the language barriers, so when it came down to it, they were left to demonstrate their thoughts with gestures and body language. So here's a list of gestures you should avoid doing when you travel overseas. The A-OK sign. First up, we have a widely recognized gesture of having a good time, the OK sign, sometimes called the ring gesture, which is performed by connecting the index finger to your thumb to make a circle and raising the remaining three fingers. Usually, it's used as a form of agreement and compliance. However, if you use this in countries of Brazil, Greece, and Turkey, it holds a different meaning and means you're calling the person you're talking to an a-hole, which is especially offensive to the LGBTQ community. Back in the 50s, then US President Nixon was the subject of ill talks when he used the sign while disembarking on a plane to a crowd of Brazilian journalists and government officials. On the other hand, Japan translates this gesture to zero or having no money, while Central Europeans use this sign and put their nose inside the ring made by the fingers to express drunkenness, which imitates a person holding a bottle. In recent years, this symbol has been linked with white supremacy groups, hence be careful throwing this sign around. Using your left hand. For all you folks out there who are born left-handed, we've got some bad news for you. I mean, Western countries and other English-speaking countries don't really have much of a problem if you're using your left or right hand, but if you ever find yourself in the lands of India, Nepal, or somewhere in the Middle East, then it's best to pretend to be ambidextrous. In India, the left hand is considered to be unclean since it's used to handling dirty kinds of stuff and other matters like to clean yourself up, or in what they and in some other countries like to call ablutions. As such, it is completely rude to eat using your left hand or use it to perform other matters such as picking things up or shaking hands. In Japan, there was a time that it was also considered ill manners to use your left hand, so parents corrected their children's hand dominancy so as not to give a bad impression to others. Thumbs up. Generally, in most English-speaking countries, it means good job. The thumbs up gesture, for all we know, is a pretty harmless sign that when it's displayed, someone is feeling in good spirits, is in approval, or having a good time. But alas, not everybody shares the same thoughts about this hand gesture. This hand gesture was thought to have been popularized during World War II. Pilots used the thumb sign to communicate with ground crews before takeoff. The pilots were believed to have gotten it from the Chinese, who used the thumbs up to mean number one. On the other hand, using the thumbs up in scuba diving signifies the end of a dive or to extend, so it really has a lot of meaning, but just don't use it in the countries of Greece, Iraq, Iran, and Italy, since it's associated with an extremely offensive insult and is the equivalent to the America's middle finger sign. Fingers crossed. Crossing your fingers is widely known as an expression hoping for good luck and a favorable fortune, or when telling a lie in many English-speaking cultures. But in Vietnam, crossing your fingers in the country is an expression of vulgar language and is known as the symbol for a woman's genitalia. Interestingly enough, this hand gesture was first used in earlier times by Christians as a form of protection from evil, since crossing your fingers is like forming a Christian cross. During the prosecution, the use of this gesture helped them identify their fellow Christians, and it was believed that these makeshift cross gestures protected them from going to hell. Holding your hands up with your palms face outward. Next on the list, we have another sign that we've all known to be harmless, but this is not the case in different countries. From what we know, holding your hand up with your palm facing outwards is a gesture for stop or hold, or if you're feeling sassy, it means talk to the hand. But in Greece, this sign is known as the moutsa and is the ultimate form of insult in the country. This symbol is still in use in Greece and originated from ancient Byzantine, where thieves and other criminals would be paraded through the city with their faces smeared with dirt and excrement, moutsos. This process involved collecting feces in the palm and then extending your fingers over the criminal's face, so the gesture itself became insulting. Pointing. To continue the list, we have pointing, which is generally considered rude throughout the world, whether you do it by your mouth, fingers, or hands, especially in Asian countries like Japan, China, and Indonesia, as well as in some Latin American countries. The intuitive act of pointing is considered disrespectful, especially if it's directed to another person, and more so if the left hand is used. In some cultures, pointing by using your whole hand is considered more polite and respectful and even acceptable to some. The V sign. During the Second World War, then Prime Minister Winston Churchill was famously known for using the V sign as a symbol of victory, which you do by holding your hand up with palms facing outwards and then holding the index finger and middle finger up while curling the rest of your fingers down. Anti-war activists later adopted it as a symbol of peace, and today the gesture is known as the peace sign. Just make sure not to flip your hand around, since in certain countries like the UK, Ireland, Australia, South Africa, and New Zealand, this gesture is considered obscene and is equivalent to the America's middle finger gesture. No victory there. Touching the head. Touching the head seems like a harmless gesture to many, especially in Western countries where it's pretty common to pat someone on the head or ruffle a person's hair, but this action is frowned upon by Buddhist communities, especially in Sri Lanka and Thailand. Both literally and figuratively, the head is considered the highest part of the body. It is sacred because that is where the spirit exists, and so touching another person's head is very rude, even if it is intended as a friendly gesture. So do remember not to ruffle someone's hair or touch his or her head when you're in Thailand or Sri Lanka. Practicing hands off is also very common in a lot of countries, so calling out to someone using your index finger. Calling someone out by pointing your index finger to the person you're talking to and curling it towards you seems like a pretty harmless way of asking someone to come closer. In Western countries, it's popularly known as "come here," but this practice doesn't sit well with several East Asian countries. For instance, in the Philippines, this gesture is not only used to call dogs or any other animals, but never towards another person. While in Singapore and Japan, turning your palm up and motioning your fingers is a sign of death, with the appropriate beckoning gesture that involves holding your hand at head level and facing your palms down. Direct eye contact. For many, speaking to another person, making direct eye contact signifies that your attention is fully focused on them and is also considered as a sign of respect when talking, especially into adulthood. However, that's not exactly the case in the Middle East, especially if you're talking to someone of the opposite sex. Eye contact could come off as a sign of flirting in some of the cultures, hence it brings a lot of misinterpretations when used in foreign lands. In Latin America and some parts of Asia, making direct contact when an adult is talking is considered a sign of disrespect, since many of the children in these countries grew up learning not to look at their elders' eyes to show respect. But in the workforce, direct eye contact is also not practiced in these lands, since they're expected to pay their respect and courtesy to their superiors, especially in the work environment, and by averting their gaze, they are showing them respect. The devil's horn. And finally, last but not least, we have the devil's horn. This hand gesture is frequently used in American pop culture as well as many other countries for fans of heavy rock music, which we see they put up during concerts. This sign screams "rock on, man," which is seen as a pretty cool and dope thing to do, where you put your hands up and bring your middle finger and ring finger down. Just make sure that you don't use this sign in the lands of Italy, Colombia, Brazil, Portugal, and Spain, since they consider this gesture as a form of insult. When the horns are used in these countries and directed to someone, it means you're calling them a cuckold, which traditionally refers to the often oblivious husband of an adulterous wife. In the Spanish, Italian, and Greek languages, a cuckold translates to horned. With that, we're wrapping up today's episode, and hopefully you learned a lot. So whenever you're in a foreign land, try avoid doing these gestures when you travel overseas. We're done for today, but don't forget to hit the like button before you go and subscribe to our channel with the notifications on so you won't miss a thing. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you again next time.